Welcome to Rafa Said It Here, a show about everything and anything that happens in our lives that impacts our mind, body, and spirit. I am so glad that you're joining us today. Welcome to the show. So, welcome to Rafa Said It Here. Today's episode, we have a very special guest for you guys. If you are tuning in from Spotify or Apple, make sure that you hit that follow button and also the notification so you can get notified of my latest episode. If you're listening through Apple or any other podcast platform, make sure that you also hit the follow button. And if you're tuning in from YouTube, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. So just want to do an introduction, a very special person I've known for a little while. And her name is Julie Hawley. She's an ERYT 500, a YACEP personal trainer, cancer exercise specialist. She's also a certified nutritional coach and energy healer with a degree from Howard University, where she studied art and journalism. She entered the wellness industry in 2003 with the goal of helping people feel better mentally, spiritually, and physically. In 2010, she expanded her wellness practice into yoga space and began teaching full time in 2014. In 2023, she published her first book, Breath by Breath, which is a journey of yoga and loss. In this book, she explores the intersection between spirituality and grief after the sudden loss of her mother, Joanne. Her book is for sale online at Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, Target, and also you can find signed copies that may be purchased at theyogaauthor.com. For a decade, Julie has gained the reputation of teaching yoga classes that are not only fun, but also educational. She has a history of building a strong yoga community that is steeped in integrity, curiosity, and laughter. You can practice with her at any time at toembodyyoga.com. Julie, welcome to Rapid State here. I'm so excited and happy
Thank
to have
you.
you. So
I'm thrilled to be here.
Yes. So I'm gonna jump right into it. Okay.
Okay.
So you went from art and journalism to the wellness space. What was the switch? Like, what was that moment or the aha moment that said, okay, you know what? This is the direction that I want to go. This is what I feel like I've been called to do. Like, what was that moment?
Wow, you're taking me way back. Let's see. So we're going back to when I became, all right. So I had to go back in my mind. So I had many office jobs trying to figure out what I was going to do because I majored in art and I minored in journalism. And my original plan, once I graduated Howard, was to move to New York City and explore. My dream was to work at Vogue, um, and and then start my own fashion magazine. Things happened here at home. My parents separated. My younger brother was 8 or 9 when that happened, and I just didn't feel right leaving the DC area. So that led to a series of temp jobs and just unfulfilling work until fast forward many years, and I worked at United Nations Foundation, and that opened my eyes to the fact that you can have a job that actually does good in the world. And I wasn't familiar with nonprofit work before that, or for working without the end all be all be about money. And so that kind of started a little bit of the kindling of, oh, there's more to work than making money. And so I left there. Actually, I got fired from there, but that's a whole other story. I'll just say that it was that just, and I was compensated. Um, and I just, I went to job fairs like people do when you lose your job. And I signed up with Mary Kay. And through Mary Kay, I discovered that I was pretty good at doing makeup. And at that time in Maryland, this is like 2003, I think. You had to be licensed to touch anybody in a professional way. And so to get licensed for makeup, you had to go to an esthetician school. So I went to the school to check it out. It was called Yvonne de Villar. I was in Virginia. And they gave me like a facial because they were short models for their students. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like it makes sense to help people with their skin before you slather makeup on it. And so that was my intro into wellness. And I worked at, day spas like most people. And then after I think I was in the field like 7 or 8 years, I worked at a wellness center, and there was an acupuncturist that co-owned it. And she got a treatment with me. She wasn't familiar with facials. She just thought they were this frou-frou, frivolous sort of thing until she realized, oh, this is like a deep cleaning, there's massage, there's, an exchange of energy. And she told me, she's like, it's time for you to do more. And she was also a licensed social worker. So some of her acupuncturist clients had deeper things happening. And she sent a couple of them to me because she was like, your touch is very therapeutic. She sent me people that had insecurities about their skin, whether it's from acne, wrinkles, excessive, whatever. And she noticed that when they would come to me, they would just feel better about themselves. And so we had like this nice synergy. But from her saying, it's time for you to do more, like your gift is greater than just this. And then that really opened my eyes. And I really, I always enjoyed it. Like I always enjoyed seeing people get off the table and they feel great. And, their chin is up a little higher, their skin is glowing. But she really opened my eyes so that I could see that, oh, this is like life changing. Like this is wellness. Like taking care of your skin, having someone tell you, you know, don't eat dairy if you have acne because it's going to cause inflammation. Um, and just seeing people take control of their lives and assisting them with that. And so at this wellness center, they also offered yoga, and I was taking yoga classes. And one of my favorite teachers, actually, the techie, and Claudia Newman and Lauren Robinson, they started the first yoga teacher training at that center. And because I worked there, they gave me a discount on tuition. And so that's how I became a yoga teacher. And again, during that training, so it was my first 200-hour training, I had an affinity for it. And they recognized that as well. It just came very natural to me. I don't know why, except that Claudia told me, she's like, well, you don't choose yoga, yoga chooses you. And then it made more sense. And so that's where I've been ever since.
Got it. So basically, I always say that whatever we're called to be, like at least the way it works for me is like doors begins to close, to shut, and then it begins to push us in a specific direction that sometimes we really don't understand why what's happening.
Yes.
But it's actually leading you to the place where you're supposed to be, which is awesome, which I love it. But I like the idea that I think the first signal, the first sign, which I would like to say for you, is the aha moment is when people feel your energy.
Yes.
And the touch. And I love that moment that here you are just doing cleaning, but you're healing. You're also healing them at the same time. I had an experience similar to that when I was in Bahia this past year, and I went to get a massage. And I remember, telling this young lady, I said, "Listen, you're gonna do something beyond your massage because because people get massages, you feel better, you feel
right.
Her hands were so healing. Like whenever she touched, and I felt the energy, and I told her, I said, I don't know what it is that you're looking to do in your life, but begin start
Yeah.
considering energy healing because of that touch,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes. Yeah. It's almost
So,
like you're tapping into like a portal, right? And
mhm,
and I and I would meditate before I would touch without really knowing at that time what that I was meditating, right? But it
yeah,
would just be like this moment before I lay my hands on this person of getting myself grounded and letting go of, whatever rubbish happened prior
mhm,
to that moment. And I even remember I had a coworker once that was very gossipy and she wanted to gossip with me. And I was like, I'm seeing clients. Like I'm not taking that in. Like I'm getting ready to go into the room and spend like the next 4 hours touching
yeah,
different people and receiving from them and giving to them. I don't have space for that. Like really never at work and
yeah,
really not really interested in it at
yeah,
all. Because
yeah,
you do have to hold that space because
yeah,
you have to create that portal for the divine to move through you, whether that's through your
yeah,
words or your touch or your actions. Yeah.
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 I definitely agree with that because we're the like you say, we're portals. And we can
Mm-hmm.
either receive light or we can receive what I like to call the dark or the negative energy. Everything's energy. So,
Right.
we either receive
Right.
more light or we can, because sometimes when people come with the dark energy, it's not that we're receiving, it's taking all the light that we have within us,
Yeah.
sucking
Yes.
the life out of us. So definitely agree with
Yeah.
that. I noticed that when I was, reading your bio, that you
Mm-hmm.
cover what I also cover in my work, which is mind, body, and also spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that important? Like, why is that important that
Mm-hmm.
as humans, through this human experience, we have all those three things balanced?
Right. For me, it starts with the spirit is, I'm going to actually go deeper and say the soul, right? So the soul is the part of us that is permanent. So the soul is the part of us that is the divine expressing itself through us. And so we have to remember that. So once you remember that, once I remember that I'm divine, you're divine, my pet is divine, the trees, the sky, everything of the natural world is an aspect of that, then you're able to cultivate this compassion and you're able to do this kind of work. You're able to impart your peace onto other people. Like you've probably had the experience where before you stepped into the room was in complete chaos. And people were bouncing off the walls and voices were raised and people were just running amok. And then all you did, you didn't open your mouth, you just walked into the room and everybody just kind of chilled out. And so when you're able to tap into the soul, then that awakens the spirit. And that's the awakening part. That's what calls you to yoga or Reiki or whatever your healing modality may be. And then you share that with the world. But until you have that understanding, that basic understanding that your soul is permanent, because it comes from a thing that is permanent, and you can call that thing whatever you want. You can call it Tao, you can call it Kali, you can call it Shiva, you can call it Jesus, you can call it whatever. You can go down a whole list of different things to name it, but it has no name. It just simply is. And then we are just a part of that isness. And I think that, when we attach that to the mind aspect of it, that it calms the mind, but it also frees the mind. I did a TikTok the other day and I was talking about chakras and how you can look at our two current presidential candidates and see whose chakras are more imbalanced and who's out of balance and how that's reflected. And, we have Kamala expressing joy, um, talking about policy and actual issues. And we have another person name calling. and that's an imbalance. We have one person working in a place of security, of knowing who she is, and someone who doesn't.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's why it's important, because if you're constantly, if you think that it's just you, that this is it, that is just flesh, bone, breath, and that you just have to come here and take all that you can, that's a soul sickness. And that's where we are in the world, right? It's not that it's the patriarchy, it's that there's an imbalance between the patriarchy and the matrix. So we need both. And that's all yoga is. Yoga is just finding that balance and reminding people that that balance is within. It's in all of us.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's what, and I do think that we are transitioning into that awakening. I think that's why so many of us are called to this work right now. I know, like most Americans just grew up in a culturally Christian, semi-faithfully Christian home, and now I talk about that you are divine.
And I like, and thank you for that reminder that we are divine and that we are here experiencing as a divine being what it is to have this human experience. And you mentioned the balanced, right? Because if we're talking about divine beings, that includes everyone. For someone that might be listening to that, and they're like, "What do you mean we're all divine beings? You're telling me this other person is also divine?"
Yeah.
Which I believe so. I'm with you, but how would you? Well, two-part question.
Okay.
One, how would you say someone can tap into the understanding that they are divine beings? That's the part
Mm-hmm.
one.
Okay.
And two, uh, if those that see themselves on the other side, how do they get to
Mm-hmm.
balance that part of themselves as well?
Yeah. So because we are energy, we all operate on frequency. And so I know a lot of people, like in this world, in the yoga, wellness, alternative world, a lot of them poo poo religion. Either they were hurt by religion and they ran from it, or they just never believed in religion. And that's fine. I just feel like religion is one of these frequencies, right? So, religion, like for me, religion was my gateway into spirituality. Like, if I wasn't like, on fire for Jesus first, I wouldn't have gotten to where I am now. So I never like poo poo people that are very faithful in their religion. And I think that, I think it's just I think that you get chosen. Like, I think that the divine recognizes like a certain level of maturity. And I think that you can recognize your maturity if you're still questioning, because you should always be questioning. There's no final answer. So I think if you are in a religion that says this is the only religion and every other religion is going to get you thrown into hell, or whatever, then that's the time to question, right? Because you see all these other people who are very good people that are actually doing good works in the world, feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, but they might not be Christian. Are they going to hell? And then you have to question, well, what are the motivations? Why is a hell necessary? Right? And you have to start questioning. I know for me, one of the biggest questions, I wish I could recall the name of this book, but it was a book about goddesses.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things the author wrote was that the word Shekinah is a Hebrew feminine proper noun. And anybody that went to church knows Shekinah, especially went to the Black church, Shekinah is the Holy Spirit. And I was like, well, why was I never taught in my Black church that the thing that you actually accept upon your baptism, when you come up out the water, you've accepted the Holy Spirit. No one tells you that that is the feminine. And so the question started, well, why is that? And why are women told to be quiet in the church when one of the first pastors was Deborah? Why is that? Why are we not taught in school, even though, we're here in the States, but why aren't we taught in school that enslaved people were often converted quote fingers to Christianity on the slave ship to fetch a higher price once they hit here? Why aren't we taught that in other countries that practice Christianity? Like if you go to China, their picture of Jesus is a Chinese person. And you go to Europe, it's a European person, and so on and so forth. But when you go to here or Africa, they put a white Jesus, and you start to question. So that's one sign that your soul is evolving. The moment you stop questioning things, like my teacher Douglas Brooks says, the only answer to a question is a better question. And so the more knowledge you gain, the better the questions are that you're able to ask. So I think for people that are kind of stuck or just not in a frequency, just take a moment. It doesn't have to be like a long, hour long meditation. It could be 2 minutes. And just let yourself be still for 2 minutes. No music, no TV. You can even stand still. You can sit in a chair. You don't have to be in lotus pose on the floor. And just give yourself 2 minutes and see what question comes up. It could be a question about you. It could be, why am I addicted to food? It could be, why did my parent treat me this way or my partner treat me this way? And then start there, because that little question doesn't have to be about, God and the universe. It doesn't have to be that big of a question, but it can just start there. Like, why are you at that point in your life and why are you stuck there? And that's the first step of your journey, is just asking, like, why am I stuck here?
I think that's brilliant. I mean, I always say, no matter what it is that you leave, where you are, it doesn't matter. Always starts with that why. Why
Yes.
is this? Why am I in this movie? That's my favorite. Why am I in this movie? Why is this in my movie? And I don't know for
Mm-hmm.
certain that the answers begins to unravel themselves. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm definitely in agreement with that. It's funny you mentioned the Holy Spirit. I have a tattoo in my arm, and it says "Woman, Holy Spirit." Because I also learned, it's when I learned, like, wait, I had my awakening, like, wait, no one told me that either. But I actually discovered that
Yeah.
because I realized that the same letter in Hebrews that you found in the Holy Spirit, you found in the word women. So in
Mm.
actual Hebrew, they
Mm-hmm.
share the same letters that
Yeah.
describes the same thing. So it was a life changing for me because now I felt like there's this completion.
Mm-hmm.
We were
Yes.
right. Okay,
Yes.
now it makes sense. Okay,
Yes.
father, mother, and child. The family structure, right? You can have father,
Yeah.
father, and child.
Exactly.
And
Right.
so for me, it was also an aha moment.
Okay. Sounds good.
Um, so I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So it is important that and you say starting with the soul,
Mm-hmm.
right? You say you with the soul, and then that leads. So I know for different people, it's starting different points. You would say starting with the soul can lead
Mm-hmm.
then into the body and also the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say
Mm-hmm.
that's the direction that you think folks?
Yeah. I mean, it's all connected. So some people get to the soul through the body, right?
Okay.
So people, they come to a yoga class because they hurt, right? And they're like, oh, my back hurts. I've done this, I've done that. It's not working. I'm gonna try yoga. Or my doctor sent me to yoga. And if they have someone who is um skilled, and then they can weave in a theme
Mm-hmm.
that takes you deeper, right? Or even if someone is chanting Om in their class, And I believe that if you're chanting anything, then you need to let people know what that is and what that
Yeah.
means. Um, and then that's the question. Well, why do you chant that? And hopefully the teacher knows. So I'll tell you this too. A lot of yoga teachers will be in your room chanting Om. They have no idea what Om means, where it came from. They think it's Sanskrit. There's like all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Um, and hopefully you have a teacher that's able to educate you on what that means. And then that sends you down that rabbit hole. So it
Yeah.
can start in your body. It could start off with, I know I've had many experiences just dancing, like to regular secular music, and you have like that spiritual thing, or you're running or you're walking or whatever. So it can start in the body, but it's probably led still by the soul. Like the soul's like, okay, let's let this song play. Because the soul knows that your body's going to react this way, and you're going to be ecstatic. You're going to be like, I want more of that, and but you're going to figure out it wasn't the song, it was something else. And you're going to start searching for, well, what is that something else?
Yeah. I saw on your bio that you are a cancer exercise specialist. I've never heard of
Yes.
that before. I didn't want to go Google it because I'm like, no, I'm just going to wait for her to share
Uh-huh.
with us what it is. What is a
Mm-hmm.
cancer exercise specialist?
Yeah. So it's a personal trainer that has an extra certification in cancer exercise. And so what that means is that you get extra education about how do you interact with someone under chemo, because their immune function is taken down. It goes into how the lymphatic system can be damaged because lymph nodes are often removed, especially during breast cancer, um, mastectomies. Um, and so just different ways to handle that. So that's what the certification does. The experience of it, like anything else, like you have to do it to actually understand what it is. So if it's something like if you are a personal trainer, yoga teacher, it's something that you're looking into, you have to be very flexible, because you have to go with the rhythms of your client. And you, for example, if it's a chemo week, they're not going to have a lot of energy. So you want to focus on breath work, you want to focus on meditation, maybe some light stretching. If it's a steroid week, they're going to want to go full on, but it's your job to keep them held back, because the drugs are making them think they're much stronger than they are, and you can actually cause a setback. You also have to just be ready for the emotion of it. So I had a client, and she was my student prior to her diagnosis. And then after her diagnosis, she wanted to do private with me. And this was somebody that, God forbid I get a cancer diagnosis, but if I do, I want to be like Sandy, because she had had it before. She had it 40 years prior. And she just had the mindset of, I'm going to live my best life. And, it started off pre-pandemic. So I was actually going to her house, and she was able to do everything. And I practiced with her. She passed after my mom. She passed like 2 months after my mom. And I worked with her. So we went from literally her standing, being able to do everything, to her doing yoga in her hospice bed with the
Mm,
help of a nurse 2 weeks prior to till she died. And so you have to also be ready for that emotion of it, because you're on this ride with them. And she's the first one that I've lost. Most of my other, I've had many, but the other three, they're still with us, thankfully. but it's very important that if you are diagnosed with cancer, to exercise. That's one of the most important things that you can do for yourself is exercise and watch what you eat. Keep in mind that physicians are not trained in nutrition. They are trained in medicine and they are trained in surgery. And, we should all be very thankful for that, but don't go to your doctor for nutrition advice. um, so if you are diagnosed with cancer, you want to avoid refined sugar because that's what cancer cells eat. I have a friend that's a radiology tech, and they actually inject you with a little glucose so they can see the cancer cells when they're scanning your body. Is it just they light up? They're like, "Ooh, sugar."
Right.
Um, you want to avoid alcohol because alcohol again is just this fermented sugar. Um, and those are things that your doctor probably won't tell you. And it's not that they're being negligent; it's just that they don't know. That's not where their education is. And so that's how that works. And it's rewarding because I get so many lessons from these women that are living with this diagnosis, this disease, and like they'll call me and they sound wiped out, and I'm like, oh, do you want to reschedule? They're like, no, I still want to do it, and just like this fight, this will, and I really do believe that these people to just will themselves through it, and just like that tenacity, and to witness that because I'm sitting there, as the trainer, and I'm like motivating, and they don't understand like how much they're motivating me. Like when I have like a bad day, and I just, I think of Sandy, I think of several other women that I worked with during their. I remember one client called me, and she was basically saying goodbye, and thank God, like she's still with us. This was like many years ago. And it turned out that she was misdiagnosed. She did have cancer, but they diagnosed the wrong one, the wrong kind. And then luckily she had the means to seek out additional physicians, and she got the
Yeah.
correct diagnosis. And that's why she's still here today. She got the correct diagnosis from a woman. And that's why she's still here. Yeah.
Why a cancer exercise specialist? Why cancer patients?
Um, a lot of things with me is it just pops up in my inbox
Mhm.
and I just say yes. And it just turns out to be the best thing.
Yeah.
It was like with the yoga teacher training, they happened to have it where I was working anyway. I knew a couple of the teachers. I was like, okay. And that's basically how my life goes. Like I am not a model of planning or business plans or, you asked me to do the podcast. Yeah. Okay.
I basically what I like to say, just being led by the spirit and what feels right at
Hmm.
that moment to do. I'm the same.
Yeah. And yeah, I just
You
feel
know?
like those opportunities come in front of you for a reason. Like you
Yeah.
meet people for a reason, and a reason isn't always to your good,
Yeah.
unfortunately. At least it feels that way in the beginning, but then when you look back, you're like, oh wow, that was like, the boss I had that fired me unjustly.
Yeah.
But in many, many ways, if that didn't happen, then I wouldn't have written my book. I wouldn't have taught, I don't know, thousands of people by now yoga. I wouldn't have helped all those people with their skin. Um, so it'll work out, but you have to keep moving. Like you can't let these things kill you.
Yeah.
You have to keep moving. And I know
Yeah.
like people feel like they get into this spiral of nothing works out. That's because you're not moving. You got to keep moving, even when it's hard, you
Like what I
know?
like to call reinventing yourself, you know? I had a similar story where, oh, this didn't work out. This I had to move here, go there. But in the midst of all the things shifting, I just kept
Mm-hmm.
producing. I kept creating. I kept like, okay, what is the next thing that I got to put together? Is it something new? Is it just more of the same or whatever it is? Just keep creating.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yes.
and without the attachment of the end result, because
Right.
that only we don't like I said that could have been the end result here, but then there's this other thing that shows up, and I like to call it,
Yeah.
doing what I call missionary work. Just
Yeah.
going place to place and serving because I believe that we're here to
Yeah.
serve others in whatever
Absolutely.
in their stage of life.
Absolutely. And that's really, when I look back on the things that I enjoyed. So first when I graduated, it was like this pressure of, now you're a college graduate and you graduated from Howard and you think of all these great people like graduated from Howard. And you're like, well, I got to be on that list with those people. Like, I can't be a regular Bison, right? I have to be, like Tony and Thurgood and Kamala and Chadwick. I have to be on that list, but you don't,
Mm,
right? You have to do your mission and you have to. And so when I graduated, it was like, how do I get like that job to put me on that list with those people? And it turned out I'm not an office worker. Like, that's not like when I discovered esthetician work and this idea of learning. You have to learn about the skin, you have to learn about the different products, you have to learn about what to mix and what not to mix, all those things and skin types. And but then, so taking that cerebral part and then marrying it with touch and with movement, I was like, okay, this is my jam. And then I kind of topped off with what I wanted to do in that field, which, because I more so worked in like the natural skin. I wasn't never really interested in the lasers and all the stuff they do now. Um, and so as that, and it's funny because, like you said, when you're being led by the spirit for that thing will leave you. And I used to love being an esthetician. Like, I loved it. I loved everything about it. Right. I used to make little, mix CDs and my music and everything. And then one day, and sadly, like, it was in the middle of someone's treatment, but I felt the calling leave. And it's not that they got a bad treatment because it's muscle memory at that point. Um, but it wasn't that spiritual exchange. And and then I felt like because it was no longer at that level, it was time for me to do something else. Because if I can't give them all of me, I
mhm.
don't want to do it. And so as that was leaving, then the yoga was like, oh, let me take you over here. And and as far as like asana, so for people that don't know, asana is the physical aspects of yoga. So that's what most people are familiar with. It's like all the contorting and all that stuff, which I'm okay at. Like, I don't do, as I was 33 when I started, so I'm not doing any weird gymnastic sort of stuff. I'm just not. I'm very good at what I do. What I'm finding now that I'm 51, and it's kind of like, yeah, I'm stronger than I was at 25 and a lot of other things, but still, I'm 51. And so it's like, well, where do I want the yoga to go now? And so that's when I got more serious about my studies with Douglas Brooks and really understanding the philosophy and the myth and where it comes from, and that it's as old as the planet itself. It's as old as human. It actually predates Homo sapiens. It's from when the all the continents were still together.
Pangea.
Yes. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where Shakti comes from. That's where the goddess tradition is. So the goddess tradition is older than the god tradition.
Wow.
And we have archaeology now that proves that. The archaeology also shows that she was in Ethiopia, and before the continental drift, guess what was touching Ethiopia? Southern India. And so that's where, when I wrote the book, the the majority of the yoga, I would say 95% of the yoga is really yoga philosophy and yoga history. It's not a, it has a little bit of asana because that's what people have in their mind of what yoga is. But when you're dealing with the tough stuff, the big stuff in life,
Mm-hmm.
it's the philosophy that pulls you through.
Got it. Got it. That was interesting. I love history. Recently, a few years, well, a couple of years ago, I did my ancestry DNA.
Oh,
And it
nice.
showed the 40, which I already knew what the results would have been because my uncle had done some research prior to me even
Okay.
doing ancestry DNA, of course, and a lot of it showed that we were from the Bantu people of Congo. So I knew that.
Mm-hmm.
What I didn't know that I also had just as much percentage of the Cameroonians.
Mm.
And so, of course, that really, I was like, oh, I had no idea. So that kind of took me into another path and a rabbit hole. And I met a young lady who was from Cameroon. And she
Mm-hmm.
was talking about the different tribes, the different things. And when I started telling her
Mm-hmm.
about things that I like to do, what I was kind of connected to, and I told her I love meditation. And, I told her meditation really what has changed my life. And then I forgot the name of the tribe now, but she says, "Oh, you must be from this particular tribe that
Mm.
were similar to Buddhists." And I've always
Ah.
had this affinity, this connection, this like thing with Buddhism, right? So I thought it was super interesting because sometimes we're thinking Buddhism, we're thinking
Mm-hmm.
just Asia countries, but in reality, it's
Right.
so much older than that.
Yeah.
So it's like there's this
Mm-hmm.
tribe in Cameroon that that practice Buddhism, what we call now
Yeah.
Buddhism, right?
Right. Right. Right.
But it was
The
called something else. It was
consciousness.
just a
Yeah.
way of life, just sit in the
Yeah.
meditation. And so I'm
Yeah.
really connected to sounds, to bells, to things, that
Yeah.
thing. And so
Mm-hmm.
there was always, but I always love
Mm-hmm.
when people share history because we think it's just
Mm-hmm.
a specific way, but it's so much wider than we believe it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, what we forget is that the world has been anti-Black for centuries. It's been anti-Black, it's been anti-Africa for centuries. So I remember I was reading um, a book about the sutras, and it was from a different, it was from a tantric perspective. And he's like, "Oh yeah, well, Sanskrit is the world's oldest language." I'm like, "No, it isn't." Like, how
Children.
could it be?
Yeah.
If it's not from Africa, it's not the oldest anything. Period.
Yeah.
Um, and so, when we read these things, we have to be very careful to remember that our people, our ancestors, never get credit where credit is due. It's just like a lot of people don't realize that the chakras are in Yoruba.
Mhm.
Yoruba is arguably the oldest religion on earth,
Yeah.
the West African belief system.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but we never get credit for anything, you know. So yeah, so I think that history is very important, and I wanted to bring that up about yoga because we do need to acknowledge, those two things. And you can even look at the people of southern India and you can look at the people of Eastern Africa, and they look very similar.
Yeah.
Um, and it's just another way of making sense and rebalancing the world. Um, yeah, and getting the truth because everybody has to know
Yeah.
truth. And these are
Absolutely.
things that can be backed up with archaeology and just me, talking. This is
Yeah,
stuff that I learned from a man that has 3 degrees from Harvard.
right. Exactly. Absolutely. Just switching gears a little bit,
Mhm.
because I do want to talk a little bit about your book. I know that you also lost your mother to cancer. My,
It wasn't cancer. It was, we actually don't know what it was. It was a
okay.
sudden lung
Mm,
infection, but it was not COVID, but
mhm.
it was the same result as if it was.
If it's, oh, got it. Got it.
Yeah.
For some reason, I thought I read cancer, but so my
Yeah.
apologies, but my
It's
condolences
okay.
to you.
Thank you.
And I know that with it comes grief. And
Hmm.
I know that there is no set formula to deal with grief. But I know
Right.
there are things that people can do um,
Hmm.
to kind of, because I know grief is something that stays. It's not is anything that
Right.
goes away. What would you say for someone that's dealing with grief at this very moment? Like,
Hmm.
what is that one thing that they can
Hmm.
do to kind of embrace it so that it could
Yeah.
give them something?
Yeah. I think the most important thing is to feel it.
Mm,
We are taught there's a couple things. So, I'm an entrepreneur. My two brothers aren't. They got like 3 days bereavement. I gave myself 2 weeks, and even after 2 weeks, it wasn't enough. But I knew if I went longer than 2 weeks, I wouldn't go back to doing anything.
mm,
So you must feel, and you must feel it all. You must feel the sadness, the anger, the love, the regret, the guilt, the love again, because you have to remember that when you grieve deep, but the depth of your grief is the depth of the love that you had for that person. And so once I was able to frame it that way and to be reminded by friends that and family that that's what it was, then you can deal with it because it's and it's somatic things that happen. There's things in your nervous system that happen. So I could not do asana right away. I did it 2 weeks later because I had to, because that's how I eat. Um, but the movement that worked best for me was just like jerking. Like
mm,
my nerves would literally just fire, and I write about that in the book. And I would just jerk, or um, I remember one day, and I wish I could remember what song it was. It was probably rock. Knowing me, it was. I'm,
mm.
I'm thinking it was like a Jane's Addiction song. Um, and I just remember spinning around and like flailing, like just really hard, and just letting my body feel and letting my body feel the emotions. Um, Scream. I one day I just grabbed a pillow because I'm in a townhouse and I want to alarm the neighbors. And I tell you, that was the best thing. Like I don't know, I need to do like a yoga class, like where we just scream.
Great.
Um, and I Yeah, and so that would be my first bit, is to feel. The second thing is you do have to set a deadline for when you are going to return to normal activities. And it's going to suck at first, but that routine will remind you that you are in fact still here,
Yeah.
and that you're still here because you have your mission to complete. Your person completed their mission. Even if you lost your person when they were maybe only, like, I have a cousin that passed away when he was only 3 years old, but he fulfilled his mission. So you go when you fulfill your mission. Um, and so you still have like this mission. And that first day the first day after you lost your person is the hardest. Like for me, it was just very strange waking up to a day that my mother will never see. Like that was just, it was very disembodying and weird. It was just like weird. Like that's the only word I have for it. It was just, it's very weird when you wake up and your person is not there and the
Yeah.
world is still going
Moving.
on. People are
Yeah.
still going to work, kids are still going to school, earth is still turning, right? Um, and it's important to let people know it might not be the people that you think.
Mm-hmm.
I had so many people, I had people call me I hadn't spoken to in years. Not we didn't beef or anything, just life happens.
Yeah.
Um, I had clients reach out to me that I didn't even know were still reading my newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for me, that's what worked. Now, I've a good friend of mine who supported me during my acute grief, lost her mom recently, and I wanted to support her. And recently, we were together a few weeks ago, and she was like, "Yeah, I just needed quiet." So she needed the complete opposite of me. Like the quiet was killing me,
Yeah.
even though I love quiet. Start my day, but it took I think 8 or 9 months before I could start my normal quiet mornings again. And one day it just happens. And I think that's important to know. Like one day it's not going to feel horrible. The sadness will always be there, the absence will always be felt. But one day you wake up and it's like, okay, I can do this. And then lastly, I would say it's okay to laugh. So the day after my mom died, I'd already made a hair appointment and I kept the appointment. And I told, there was a stylist I never met before, but I immediately told him, you know, what happens. I didn't know if I was going to have like a breakdown or whatever. And had also experienced maternal loss and he had also lost a sibling, like rather close together. Um, but he was able to make me laugh. And I was like, I can still laugh. Because when it first happens, you think that you will never laugh again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, I still have laughter. And I think once you realize that it laughter truly is cliche, but it's true. It's the best medicine because to me it's like being able to laugh, that's like the highest sign that you're alive.
Well, it
And
increases your vibrational level. I don't know if you're
yeah,
familiar with Dr. Hawkins. He does the map of
no,
consciousness. Whenever you had an opportunity, I'll send it to you. When he
okay.
talks about the different vibrational level, which has been actually measured. And
Mm,
so, when depending on where our emotions are, it has an actual number of vibration that we actually are vibrating. It's almost kind of like a light. So, like you dim the light and you increase the light.
mm-hmm,
And so he did a study where he actually measured to see what vibrational level people were in different emotions, from sadness to
mm,
shame to grief to pride to joy.
mm-hmm,
So if one
mm-hmm.
is actually in laughter, like you're actually like turning that dial up, so your energy level
That
uh,
makes sense.
increases. So it is a great
Yeah,
because you're literally going from that dark to a little bit lighter. Like you're,
yes,
yeah. So it's
yeah,
definitely very important.
mm-hmm,
I want to say thank you for normalizing mission. I
mm-hmm,
think a lot of us forget that we're
yeah,
here having this experience and we think this is it, but there's actually in my what I believe is that we're passing through and we're having our different missions
mm-hmm,
in life. And you said this person completed their mission, which to me allows
mm-hmm.
us to continue living because there's more
Yes,
life to live. And having that
yes,
understanding that mission complete allows us to even be more connected to our mission
yes,
in life.
yes.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
with that being said, what do you think your mission is in this life?
Yeah, I think my current mission is to help other women especially like Gen X, elder millennial women, remember who they are and to raise their vibration. I do think that we are in a huge cosmic change. We're hopefully towards the end of the Kali Yuga, which is a time of so the Kali Yuga is when there's like kind of like this lack of spirituality, right? And then as we're coming out of it, we go into this golden age of spirituality. And I do believe that, this is going to be led by women, and men that are able to accept leadership and balance from women. In this current patriarchy that we're in, we've seen destruction of our environment, we've seen destruction of people, we've seen, complete species. We've never seen this level of species extinction, as we're at now, and that's all because of patriarchal belief systems. When you go back in time and you look at societies when the goddess was worshipped, right? So, what is goddess worship? Goddess worship is respecting nature, knowing that she birthed it, knowing that we are all a part of her. And so, once you move away from that, that's why we're in the state that we are in now. And I think it's very telling that we now, possibly fingers crossed, and we all do the work, we might have a woman as the leader of the free world who has both African and Tamil, not just Indian, but it's very important to know that she is Tamil. Her mother was Tamil. Those were the indigenous people of India. And if you think of how far back this woman's ancestry goes and what kind of ancestral wisdom that she'll be able to tap into to lead us out of this, and it's mind blowing. And so I think as women, it's important for us, especially now, because we're going to be targeted more to uplift each other and to protect each other, no matter what our race is, no matter our gender or sexual identity. It's important for women to stand up for women right now and to uplift women and to insist that we shine a light on each other. It's not an option anymore.
Going back to what I like to say, going back to mother,
Mm-hmm.
just connecting back to mother and to Gaia and to, because I think a lot of us women
Yeah.
are also disconnected from that space. And we're
Mm-hmm.
still not only embodying the patriarchy, but also defending the patriarchy. I think a lot of us, because
Mm-hmm.
don't, we have been disconnected from that part of ourselves.
Yeah.
And so I like to call this era going back to Gaia, going back to mother, to that
Yes.
nurturing energy, that to bring back that
Yeah.
balance,
Yeah. Yeah. And
that
that's
we're
what
missing.
Om, yeah. And that's what it means when you chant Om. So Om is a Proto-Dravidian word, Aum, Om, right? And so in Tamil, they say Amma, which
Mm-hmm.
means mother,
Yeah.
and they're the same word. So when we chant Om, we are chanting mother. We are chanting the beginning. The beginning was her.
Yeah.
And that's no matter what, if Abrahamic faith, they're like in the beginning there was a word, the word was God. Yeah. Goddess, yes.
I want to share something that I noticed. I don't know if you've noticed, but it's funny because it's interesting, um, that everything from what you're shared with me today, um, is for me felt like you're bringing mother to everyone,
Yeah.
because through your touch, from the space of your
Mm-hmm.
the beauty part, the yoga, the dealing with the cancer
Mm-hmm.
patients, you're being this mother. Because I think
Yeah.
a lot of us, when we are in that space of like say fragility, or what we see
Mm-hmm.
as fragility, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
Here comes mother, to
Yes.
hold, to nurture, to kind of nurture you through that. You're
Yeah.
nurturing people through these spaces. So I don't know if you noticed
Mm-hmm.
that, but at least that's what I got, from that
No.
experience. So in other words, you're helping bring that balance back, to everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for that, because I never thought of it that way. but hearing it from your lips to my ears, it makes sense. And it's interesting because I always thought, like I think many Gen X women were raised to think that I was going to be a wife and a mother. I've never been either. But I do feel if I did birth my own child, then I wouldn't have this energy and this drive to serve so many other people. And I've always, it's taken me, this 51st year of life to be like, all right, so I'm not going to give birth. And so you just helped me be okay with that, and you helped me understand why that is. So thank you for that.
My pleasure.
Yeah, that
Well,
was a
tell us a
blessing.
little bit about your. I would love to continue here, ask you so many more questions, but I know our time is
Mm-hmm.
limited. Tell us
Mm-hmm.
about your book, uh,
Okay.
where to find it, and also where to
Yes.
find you.
Yes. So you can find classes with me, either live classes, there's a ton of recorded classes as well at toembodyyoga.com. You can find my book if you want a signed copy at theyogaauthor.com. And the book is available on Amazon, Target online, and Barnes and Noble online. And I am at Julie Holly Life on Instagram and YouTube. Yeah, so that's where. Oh, and I'm on TikTok as the yoga author. I'm like, where am I always? I'm those places. I'm those places.
Julie, it has been such a pleasure, such a wonderful conversation. I felt like, I saw a lot of myself in you. So gosh, we have such many similar stories. And so I'm so grateful that you accepted my invitation. I'm so grateful we had to have this conversation. And my hope and my intent is that those women that are listening
Mm-hmm.
could tap into not only into their feminine energy, but to start asking the why.
Yes, yes. I
Asking
love that.
why. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me. And this has been wonderful. And yeah, we just, we have to stay on our mission and touch as many hearts as we can and just keep, spreading this high vibration so that everybody remembers that they're divine. Yeah.
Thank you. Everybody, thank
Thank
you for
you.
joining us this week. Next week, we'll be back with a new episode. If you have any question, you can send me a DM at I am Rafaela Silva or a new life school. And have a great rest of your day. Bye bye.